session, we are honored to showcase an award-winning author and consultant with experience at all levels of education. She provides consultancy in curriculum design, concept-based teaching, school transition for enhanced thinking, and pedagogical leadership. She writes to share the wisdom she has acquired through her training and 30 years of experience in education. She is a child, parent, family advocate who believes education is a transformative force for humanity. She is Lili-Ann Kriegler representing Australia. Her session title is What If Just Four Simple Concepts Could Transform Your Students' Thinking? Hello, Lili. How are you? You're on mute, Lili. Sorry.
Hello, Anusha and everybody. How are you all?
We are very, very good, Lili. The stage is yours. Thank you very much.
That is so wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, everybody's been saying this, but I can't think we can say it enough to you, Anusha, for everything that you're doing, and Gavin in the background, and the planning that has gone into this phenomenal beautiful conference. And I have just loved listening to all of the presenters. I've had such an education. Sometimes, I promise you, in my pajamas, listening to people all over the world sharing their passion, sharing their thoughtfulness, sharing their unbelievable future focus. And the range of topics has just blown me away. So thank you to everyone else for what you've been contributing. And I just love that I followed Teresa, because one of my abiding passions is the Reggio Emilia philosophy. And I'm so pleased that you had a look into Teresa's classroom to see the kind of place where I have spent many, many years of my life with children developing their creative and their critical thinking. But I wanted to just introduce myself a little bit. And one of the people I listened to yesterday was Sylvia Cranici, and she shared with us this beautiful thing that she'd done with her students in lockdown, where she'd asked them to gather 5 objects and tell how those objects explored and explained something about them. So I have got my 5 objects behind me, and you'll likely see there's this beautiful African artifact behind me, which I got in Johannesburg. And I'm from South Africa. You probably can tell from my voice, if not from what I'm wearing today. So I feel a great affinity with people like Charles and Alexander, who've been speaking earlier today. So yeah, I've been in Australia though for 24 years. So I've got a bit of a twang in those vowels as well. But you know, when you move country, you've got to make sure that you maintain your circle of friends. So friends are very, very important to me, and I just love having them. And here is a cow. Now, this represents my family, and I'm going to tell you in some crazy way how that happens. My daughter, Candace, has just got engaged, and her partner, Eric, is Australian, but he heard somewhere in Africa that people give lobolo, or they give a present when they ask for their hand in marriage. So when he came to ask my husband whether he could have my Candace, he brought this cow. So I've got this in exchange for Candace. But really this cow is all about, you know, the trust and the joy and the kind of relationships which we develop in our family. So family is very important to me. Then there's the sporting Lili-Ann, and if you have a look, you'll see the golf clubs, and truly, if I've disappeared, you'll know where to find me. I sometimes have to steer my car away from going into golf clubs when I'm getting from one place to another, because I just love being on the golf course. And then finally, and a little bit more philosophically, this is one of my treasured possessions. It was made for me by a very dear friend, and it is the dragonfly. Now, for me, a dragonfly represents eternity and infinity. And I believe that nothing comes into this universe and disappears. I think everything just changes. Everything transmutes into something else. So we won't disappear. Our efforts and whatever we're bringing into the world will just continue into the future somewhere will be somewhere our memories, the traces we've left on this earth, in this universe. And we were expected, so truly that the dragonfly is a continuity from the past. So I think each of us is really, really important in the world for our generation. And this is what my dragonfly represents. So those are my 5 things. And if I ever have a conversation with any of you, which I'm hoping I will in the future, I hope to see a lot of your 5 things as well. But we better get on to some of the work that we want to cover today. So, you know, we really have been talking a lot of the educators have been talking about having critical and creative thinking. And believe me, I live and breathe to encourage these students to have that in my classrooms. And, you know, I wrote a book, Educhameleon, and I want everyone to have this book. And so I want to give it to you. If you email me, I'm going to send you a PDF. But it is about conceptual understanding. And in it, Teresa, if you're still around, there is so much in here about the Reggio Emilia philosophy. But if we want students to use critical and creative thinking, they have to have the capacity. So they need to have these kinds of thinking in their brains. And across education, we call this kind of thinking metacognition. And I'm sure you've all heard this word. And recently, I think on Monday, we heard from Masrat Shaikh, I think, how the brain is plastic and how that brain can change shape. And one of the first, not only shape, by the way, also density, like the neurons and the dendrites and all those great things in the brain they build, you get these myelin sheaths. It's just beautiful. It becomes more dense. And so the brain weighs more. It doesn't get bigger in size, but it's denser. And one of the first people to understand this, even in the early 1960s, was the Nobel nominee, Professor Reuven Feuerstein. And he is really one of my absolute heroes. And he tells us how the brain changes. And the brain actually changes with use. Sounds crazy, but it will change if we use it. So what students are doing every single day is absolutely crucial. If they don't develop the pathways for critical and creative thinking, they just won't have the skills. So we have to ensure that students get introduced to their brains from a very young age. And I heard Teresa doing that in her classroom every day with those students. It's fantastic. So we all think, of course we all think, that's a default. But do we understand the different kinds of thinking that we're using? And so I'm hoping today that in this presentation, I can present some of the different stuff. I'm not going to use the word styles of thinking, the different modes of thinking, so that you as an educator are so clear on them, and then your kids can become totally clear on them. Because research has shown that when children are conscious of the workings of their brain, they gain much more control over their thinking processes. And that is really, really important. So what I want to do in my presentation is I'm going to introduce you to just 4 concepts. And if you saw my little trailer on LinkedIn, you'll know what they are already. So I'm going to introduce you to color, shape, size, and position, right? And often when I say that, people will say to me, Lili-Ann, for heaven's sake, you know, Teresa's children in Indonesia, they already know that in kindergarten. But it's not strictly true. There's much, much more to understanding language and understanding concepts And we have to work really hard so that students can develop different kinds of thinking. Now, the professor himself, Professor Reuven Feuerstein, he took this incredible, diffuse, very busy, very incomprehensible working of the brain, and he distilled it down into 28 cognitive functions. And I learned that in my training with him and with the Institute. So I'm not going to talk about them here, but honestly, if anyone's interested in them, they can be game-changing if you can use all of these concepts and cognitive functions in your classroom. But I want us to move away now and to get to look at these 4 concepts. And so I'm going to share my screen and hopefully everything will work. So is it all going all right at the moment, Anusha?
Yes, Lily.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy about that. Right, we're going to share this PowerPoint. And I'm just going to start it from the beginning. And here we have it. 4 concepts to enhance your students' thinking. Color, shape, size, and position. I'm going to spend a little bit longer on color, the simplest of them all. And I'm going to introduce you through color to 3 of modes of thinking. And then we will, because we have established a kind of pattern of working, we will work through the other ones a little bit more quickly so that we get to the end and there's plenty of time for people to ask questions or to make comments. So we'll spend maybe about 10 minutes on color. And Anusha, if I'm still on color and those 10 minutes are gone, you'll just give me a nudge.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
You're so cool. Thank you. All right. So to talk about why these concepts are important, I want to introduce you to someone. This is, like the professor, a very, very favorite person of mine, and her name is Dana Suskind, and she's a pediatric surgeon at the University of Chicago. She treated she embedded cochlear implants into children who had profound hearing loss. When she did her follow-up with the families, visiting them in their homes with all the siblings and across different kinds of families, she noticed that some students, some young children had more language than others and much more complex language. And she was truly fascinated by that. The research has shown that children with better language are more successful at school and more successful in life as well. She found also the research by Hart and Risley, and they had discovered that honestly some children have, look at the top in the green, 30 million more words that they hear by the time they are 5 years old than other children. So she's pretty much dedicated her work since she discovered this to bridging what they call the word gap. Now, I know that there is, after this research, there's debate, as there should be in every kind of research. And so some people have seen this as an attack on, you know, people with a lower socioeconomic background. I don't think that's true, because I think, you know, whatever background you're in, if you get the language in your home language, and I think we really have to move away from just thinking that this happens in English. We want those students to get this language, this complex language, in their home language, whatever that might be, because in many ways, your language will determine the kind of thinking you have and also your perspectives in life. So I want people to really understand that it's important no matter where you are in the world, even though there was this little bit of a debate. So let's get into color. The first thing that's going to happen when we introduce color is we want children to have, let me go back, some language, some vocabulary. And you can immediately see the minute we talk about color, there are lots of words on the screen. But these aren't the only words. We have to be careful when we start introducing topics that we introduce also some of the more beautiful and more creative and more fabulous language like yellowish white or umber or grapey purple or hazy pink or blushed apricot, for heaven's sake, or aged gold. And if you read novels or if you read poetry or if you are a writer yourself or an artist, this starts to make sense to you. So even though we start in color in a kind of very definitive way, it's very, very easy to become imaginative about it. So having a vocabulary is really not enough. Students need to understand the glue between the words and how each word relates to other words. So what students need is a way to organize language and to structure how they think. And you will have noticed, well, I might not go there. All right. So let's take a bit of a deeper dive. Let's have a little look at this color. And I'm going to ask you a question. And you can just think about it or you can write something down. But what does the color yellow make you think of? And we might ask a person at the end to share something about color. So what does it make you think of? That's my first question. They're going to be 3. The second one is, what is the color of friendship? So for me, this is a really, really beautiful question because it's just not what you expect when people start discussing color. I love it. And I didn't think of it. I found it. It's a beautiful question. And then what family does yellow belong to? So we might stop sharing and see if I can get someone brave to tell us what they came up with when they were thinking about color. Anybody brave? So what does the color yellow make you think of? What is the color of friendship? And what family does yellow belong to? Oh, wait, I'm getting some in the chat here. So people say that the color yellow makes them think of cheerfulness, of gold. Friendship is blue. I'm interested in that and I'd love to know why they think it's blue. Friendship, oh my goodness, here's someone who doesn't want to get stuck with one color, so it's a rainbow. Yellow makes people feel like brightness. Okay, so blue is calmness. So people are thinking about what these colors make them think of. So let me go back to sharing. And I hope I go back to the right place. Yep, okay. So from what people have said, they have made connections between the word yellow and the other ideas that we heard about: cheerfulness, brightness, you know, friendship is the color blue, etc. And what's happening there is our first kind of thinking, which is association. They're associating the color with prior knowledge that is already in their mind, ready to be used. So associative thinking is very valuable, but it can also take people off track. I don't know how many of you have sat in the classroom and asked this profound question, and then you get this answer that swipes in from left field and you think, what? I'm trying to talk about the life cycle of a chicken and you're telling me you had bacon and eggs down at Portsea or whatever it is. They've gone, what are they doing? They're associating. So it's not very disciplined thinking, but it's very valuable. And it's somewhere where you can start with them to come back. but we want them to know that what they're doing is associative thinking. So very consciously, we want to build children's language, their cognitive language. What processes are they using? And with younger children, you might not use associative thinking, although let me tell you, kids love language and they will learn it. But you might say something like, you're using that skill where your brain is reminding you of something. Because truly, that's what association is. Your brain is retelling you that it knows something. You're being reminded that it's there. So even if they're very young children, and I heard that people, ask this question about how to develop critical skills in very young children, you start giving them the language of what their brain is doing and how clever it is from a very early age. So associative thinking is one of the things that we can bring out of color. Now, close your eyes and imagine the color yellow. And I'm sure you can all do that. And with young children, you might say something like, close your eyes and think of something at home that is yellow and ask them to tell you what it is. With older students, you might range. You might say, okay, let's get really specific. Which insects have, with yellow, where in the environment do you see it? Where on the sports field have you seen it? So that but the minute they are thinking of something in their brain, in their mind, the minute we can visualize something in our imagination, we are freed from the world. We are no longer reliant and dependent on the here and now. So you see my little child here is doing something with a yellow circle. And when she can think of it, when she can extrapolate and have that in her mind, she enters that world of abstract thought, where you can think of anything. And this is the beautiful place you want children to be from a very young age. And that Professor Feuerstein wants us to start in the concrete world, but as soon as possible, he wants us to become more abstract in our thinking. He wants us to carry the world around with us and play with ideas in our own mind. So number 2, promise you 6, number 2 is abstract thinking. And I know you all know these styles of thinking, not styles, modes of thinking. Now, we all belong to families and groups, and we have specific relationships, and so does our color yellow. And he belongs to this group called primary colors. And what is a joy here? On this screen, you've got the language of red, blue, and yellow. You also have the 2 words primary and colors. And what we want children to do is to be able to group things together, and we all know about this, categorization, and put them together in a group that's got a name, a title. So like the title is a suitcase, you carry it around and then you put all the colors in. So my suitcase is called colors. When I open the suitcase, it's got 3 compartments in it. One compartment might be primary colors. The next compartment might be secondary colors. And then we might have the non-spectral colors like black and gray and white. So, but having the category is really important. And this is important not only here, but everywhere. Like for instance, if I say to you, electromagnetism, it also has a category. It is sources of power. If I say to you washing machine, it also has a category, electrical equipment. Whatever it is, we need to have these categories. So all words and concepts become more manageable and more organized when we place them in categories. And color is a really beautiful and very simple place to start so that they can learn the language here. And then as life becomes more complex and school becomes more complex, they can put more and more things into more complex categories. So the 3rd kind of thinking is organized or categorical thinking. And we want our students to understand where these individual words that they learn collect, where they gather, where their families are, and how they belong together. So that's really important. And color, again, is a great way to do this. So why do we do this? Because the category helps us to understand the elements, and the elements help us to understand the category. So if I have an element and it's snow, for instance, and I know it belongs, say, to the category weather, then I know that sleet is also weather. But because sleet and snow are slightly different, then that category gains more knowledge and more information. So the category and the elements in your categorical thinking are talking to each other, and they are really sharing information all the time. So if we're aware of these three modes of thinking, we can make color a much more interesting and beautiful topic. And I know I'm going over time for color, but that's all right, because we'll race through a couple of the others. But, you know, with color also, there's that thing of being an artist or being an architect. And so it never stops being relevant your whole life. And those beautiful emotional things that people were talking about, you know, brightness or cheerfulness, or the color of friendship is blue. And that's because blue means something to that person, and they worked out that it's about friendship. It continues to be important throughout the child's life, into secondary school and even into their career. Now, shape. The kind of thinking, let's just first put all of these vocabulary words on the screen. And I think instantly you get a sense that there's a lot of language around shape. So we get all kinds of shapes. And at school, we often use the universal shapes first, and they're very, very helpful, but they're not the only shapes in the world. But if we have a look at this and we go to the category headings, linear shapes, everything to do with line, two-dimensional shapes, three-dimensional shapes, and other common shapes, then there's kind of only 4 suitcases we have to worry about. So because we already use the categorical thinking, when you start introducing new areas of language, you can help children to understand the new language, because they can easily gather them together in groups and understand them really well. So when you're talking about shape, you can also use associative, abstract, and organized thinking. But I want to move on. Shapes give us this perfect opportunity to use our powers of analysis. So analysis, the important thing when you analyze something is to know what it is and what its parts are. So we understand how things are similar and different by analyzing their characteristic features. So a square has different features from a circle, okay? And let's say if we take a leap, gender identity has a completely different meaning in some contexts than it might in other contexts. So no matter what we're dealing with, we need to determine what are the characteristics or the features that make this exactly what it is. And that is analysis. It helps us to genuinely understand something, because then we're in a position to talk about it, think about it, create about it, problem solve about it, whatever it might be that's coming next. So each square has, and these are the features, 4 corners, 4 straight lines. Now, if I just said 4 straight lines, and you imagine 4 lines side by side, would that be a square? If I just said 4 corners, would that be a square? And if I said 2 pairs of parallel lines, would that be a square? So the thing about analytical thinking is it's not just about the features, but how they work together. So for this to be a square, it actually has to have all of those features. It can't just have some of them. And this is where the thinking becomes really quite important, that children understand that you need more than one source of information when you're doing these analyses. So that was 7 statements about a square. Now I'm going to show you the slide. Don't go there. Don't be horrified. There are 20 statements about a square, but I will send you the PDF about what's in the square so that you can have a look at this and think about what kind of categories you can pull out of just the square. There are so many, and it's a beautiful thing, and you will get that. I'll make sure that Anusha's got that for you. So really, in both color and shape, we're wanting the students to categorize their knowledge, to organize their knowledge, and to distinguish between different kinds, and they really have to know it well in order to do that. So let's move on to size. Size is the third concept, and I will ask you now, which is the biggest doll? I know, you all said the big one on your left, okay? When I do this and I separate the dolls into 2 groups and say which doll is bigger, something has happened, okay? So this, you had a doll that was the biggest, but when we separate them in 2 different groups, it's no longer the same doll. So the doll that was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 4th or 5th in line, 4th in line, I think, now becomes the biggest. So the idea of the thinking in size is that it's relative, that you have to consider something else to determine the truth of something, or the importance of something, or the meaning of something. It can't just coexist by itself. And when students have this beautiful relative thinking, then they can approach problems much better than if they are without relative thinking. So size gives us this perfect opportunity to think about relative thinking, or how things are related to one another. It's not always in size. It might be, which is the most clear statement, which is the most concise sentence, which is the best solution for climate change. So you can see that the thinking can be used everywhere. Now, I want you to do this mental leap for me. I want you to take size and immediately expand that word size from bigger, small, little to quantification in general. So like if you're a secondary school teacher or a middle school teacher or a primary teacher, this is all about quantification, determining the magnitude and the size of things. And when we broaden this, we are thinking about the infinite ways that human beings measure things. And clearly this can be done in 2 ways. It can be done in imprecise ways, like she's bigger or biggest, but we don't know the exact size, but it is still relevant and it gives us information, and it's great when we're trying to guess something, or, you know, when we're talking in general terms. But then there's also precise ways. So we like our students to learn this vocabulary, big, medium, small, and I want to use gigantic, infinitesimal, tiny, microscopic, gigantic, as many beautiful words as you can, because there's truly nothing that we can give children more valuable than advanced language. And this is, again, and I have to state it again, in your cultural language, in your home language, in your mother tongue. What I know, even using the word mother tongue these days sounds a bit gender biased, but the one that you're most comfortable in. But then there are also these other things that we measure. It's not just size. So we want the students to go through these concept thresholds. So things that are just big and small, whatever, but now we want them to extrapolate and to use quantification somewhere else. And we want them to become more precise with their meaning and their understanding of size. So like there's length, there's all this beautiful language just related to length. But, and don't worry about the PowerPoint because I'll also send you a PDF with all this information in it. We also measure in a whole bunch of other units. And unless the kids have really, really nailed down what one unit is, don't ask them to start measuring in another one. So start with length because it is so wonderfully easy, so simple. Don't give them area before they know length. Don't give them volume before they know area and length. You know, just don't do that to them. So that this is where consolidating the concept is so important because you want them to be creative. You want them to have critical thinking, but if they don't have the knowledge to work with, how are they going to use it to be creative? How are they going to design and use the concept of volume unless they absolutely know what it is? So liquids are measured in volume, weight is measured in weight. It's different from length. We want them, so that's why I really want you to think about size much more broadly. And not really always necessarily with the kinders, although my kinders have done volume and they've done weight, they've done heartbeat, heart rates, they've done speed, they've done every kind of measurement you can imagine. And finally, position. So we've now had how many have we had? Associative, abstract, analytical. Anyway, we're moving on to position and there's one more. So position can relate to us, our own self, or it can be a much more global concept. And again, have a look at this. The language is vast and the children need to understand what every single one of these words is. So it's always easier for them to start with the simple and go to the complex. Professor Ruben Feuerstein said it all the time, from simple to complex, concrete to abstract, the known to the unknown. And if you can keep these principles going, even if you're doing fantastic design projects, you will be helping your students. So you start maybe with just with the kinders, their body position, sitting or lying, standing, kneeling, whatever it is. I think I've misaligned 3 words. Behind, under, beside, and next to should be place, position. So they went into the wrong family, guys. And you can see that, you know, standing is very similar to vertical and lying is very simple to the same as horizontal. So when the children know that when they're lying down, what it feels like, and then you tell them that lying down is similar to being horizontal, it means something to them. So that is really important to take this language and make sure they consolidate it step by step. I love step by step. And the thinking that we are going to use here is perspectival thinking. This is a word I hate. I hate saying it. It's got such a funny sound, perspectival. But it's very important because it is the kind of thinking which helps us to understand that there are different perspectives in life. So you're looking at your screen now, and your screen is in front of you. Now, you've got a swivel chair. You swivel around and your back is to your screen and it's completely different. So something has happened. The perspective, the viewpoint has changed and you swing back again and that's all very well. Now you're facing your screen and on your right-hand side, there's a beautiful vase of flowers. Okay, We swing the chair around. Uh-oh, what happens? Now it is on our left-hand side. So everything can only be determined according to a point of view or a perspective. So perspectival thinking is really important. And again, you want these students to go through these thresholds of, you know, some in left and right and body positions and things, it changes, but others stay static. So if you are this little robot and that bicycle is to the north of you, no matter which way you turn your body, that bicycle will continue to be north of you. So there's a difference between static positions and the ones that change relatively. And that is a threshold. It's a kind of a thinking thing that students have to go through when they move from simply talking about position in space into, you know, when they start to use things like compass points, etc. Now, of course, there are so many more concepts. And if I know that Teresa talked about the PYP or the IB, and there are hundreds that you can use in the same way, but you can use them all with these kinds of thinking, the 6 kinds of thinking. And this is just a very limited number. I know the IB has 6 or 8 of the most perfect concepts you can imagine. So go there and have a look. So now have a look at the screen and think whether you can remember. Look at each one and see if you can remember the kind of thinking that was related to each of those concepts. And I'm hoping that you can. Maybe. Let's have it. See. In the chat, some people just put yes or no. And Anusha, maybe you can tell me who's remembered all 6 of these different modes of thinking.
I will, Lily.
Thank you. Put it in the chat, yes or no. Have you got them? Can't see anything new in the chat. Oh. Nazreen says she's got it. Well done. Anybody else? I'm sure you all got them. So let's go. Here they are. Color told us about associative, abstract, and categorical thinking. We added analytical thinking. We added relative thinking, and then we added perspectival thinking. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment, and let's think about why these are important for us at the moment, for the future. So we've used some fairly scholastic, haven't we? Some very like scholastic ideas, fairly concrete ideas. But when students can distinguish and name these kinds of thinking, and I know we've done speed learning here, they are able to differentiate between their cognition and the content on the page. They understanding how their brain is working. Now, cognition and emotion are 2 sides of the same coin. And, you know, a lot of the time we're talking about well-being in the modern world, and we're all talking about that. And sometimes we try to unravel it through emotion. But the place to unravel poor emotion is actually through cognition, because what happens is when children gain control of this brain of theirs, they feel successful. And the minute they feel successful, they're much more likely to have a sense of well-being. You know, so much misery in the world occurs when people feel helpless, when they feel helpless to change things, when they feel helpless to get a grip, to move forward. And we want them to feel successful. And, you know, I've listened to so many stories. There were a few earlier today of teachers who are bringing about phenomenal change for their students and making them into fantastic protagonists. And I love that word. Philip Jarvis used it the other day, protagonists, so that they can take control of their thinking, take control of their understanding and move forward. And if they have that, they automatically start to feel a greater sense of well-being. So the world we're living in is very complex. And if children can't think for themselves, if they can't use this perspectival thinking or whatever it might be, it's very easy for them to become manipulated by others. And I live here in Australia, and I promise you, every time I switch on my television, it horrifies me. And there are lots of things that horrify me on television, but the gambling advertising that is related to sport is, I don't know how many people are invested in this, but it scares me to death. Every time there's anything to do with sport, it's all this gambling advertising. How do children arm themselves against this? How do they not be manipulated? So the only way that that can happen is if they can analyze the situation and see that, you know, some people are paying for these ads, and the people who are paying for these ads have got a lot of money because a lot of people are gambling, and they want me to gamble so I can add to the money so that they can have more money so they can advertise again. So if they analyze that situation, they understand it more fully, and it helps them to make much better choices. So, you know, if you're in a design project and you're trying to work out what the goal is of your project, or, you know, what is the best idea to use or the best solution, you have to analyze everything. You have to categorize things so that you know what can be compared with what else. And then, of course, the greatest challenge in this on this planet of ours is to give them the ability to see other perspectives, to challenge them to do that. So, you know, there are so many absolutely beautiful pedagogies out there, and I've listened to people talking about them in the last week, and thank you so much for everything. I've learned so much from all of you. But, you know, if you imagine I've got a china plate and I have this beautiful pedagogy and I drop it on the plate, a marble, I drop a marble, it's just going to bounce off because there's nothing to hold it there. But if you imagine this great mushy brain with lots of understanding of different kinds of thinking, and believe me, there are more than these 6, then they're in much more of a position to be able to approach the world, to feel good about themselves, and to make the best choices and the best decisions. And so that's why I really believe that children benefit from understanding the workings of their own brain. And I highly recommend the work of Professor Reuven Feuerstein, as you've heard. But I also, you know, would love to hear from anybody interested in any more information about concepts, how to develop them, and how to develop conceptual understanding. And thank you so much for listening. I think we raced a little bit, but I hope that everybody was able to take something away from this presentation this evening.
Thank you so much, Lily. Thank you for your inspiring session. Thank you for showing us concepts of unlocking 6 types of thinking, and we have love pouring in all over the world for you. And they all say, I would love to learn more. I would want Lily's presentation. They're all messaging me from all parts of the world, inquiring me about your presentation. And I would like to remind everybody that we will be showcasing Lily's recordings on our platform educationinfluence.com with many resources to share. And now questions, Lily. We have almost 12 minutes. We have 12 minutes for you. And
Okay.
the questions are Emmanuel Apaya writes, is there a way you would recommend to implement your concepts in the special education area? How can we implement the concepts in special needs children?
Yes. Now, honestly, I'm talking about Feuerstein in the mainstream, but it has almost gained traction more so in the special needs and special education area. And the Institute is in Jerusalem, and there is a waiting list of 3,000 people at any one stage for their students who are struggling to try and learn. You know, the professor had these 28 cognitive functions, and he took the students through them in sequence so that they could learn each one. And they start at the very, very beginning with the children with special needs. And sometimes it takes an immense amount of repetition, and sometimes you have to be very creative about how you inculcate or get that concept to land. But it's very, very widely used by speech therapists, by cerebral palsy, all kinds of neurodiverse things are approached through the methodology.
Thank you so much, Lily. We have Pragya Nopani questioning, where can we read more about what you have talked?
You know what? I will give you a reading list. Are you happy with that? I'll send you a reading list. And as I've said, can you, I don't know, I can't find the chat. I want to put my email in there, because if you email me, I'm genuine. I will send you the PDF of my book, and that has a lot of information in it. Let me put it in there now.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you so much, Lily. And we have, in the meanwhile, I'm going to share some messages for you. Nisi Merchant writes, I would love to learn more. Lauren Ramsey writes, absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheryl Saha mentioning, these sessions are truly engaging, a lot to relate to and a lot to take back to our classrooms. Thank you so much. And Yuvan Prinsloo writes, this was a very informative session. Children's cognitive development is so important for us as educators to understand and acknowledge. Thank you. I have learned so much. And we have Chandani Kriegler writing, yes, it would be great if presenters can be kind enough to share their presentation, which we will share. Thank you, Chandani, for your query. And Lily, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
It's a very interesting question. And the question goes, very often, an average child globally is taught the sign to, shine circular teaching. For example, what is dizziness or is giddiness? What is giddiness is dizziness. Largely, children are taught about word to word rather than word to world. So concept to concept rather than concept to connection or concept to referent. So what is your take on this, Lily? Thank you.
So Anusha, if I've understood you correctly, you're saying that it happens in quite an abstract and a school way. So the way I presented it tonight, it looks like very, very schooly, but what we have to do is carry this information around in our mind. And then as we are doing projects in the real world with children, with real materials and real projects, and children are more and more going out of school to do their projects, we still want to just make sure that we step them through these concept thresholds so that they can use these concepts themselves. But I'm a great believer in teaching mathematics when you go shopping. I'm a great believer in, and you know, I do a podcast with my friend you've listened to, Ortal Green, the other evening, called The Thinking Effect. And that was one of our topics, was how we can teach mathematics in a real world situation, real world maths. And yeah, I'm a great believer in putting the information contextually with the actual situation, contextually at the event, so that it really fits with children and sits in their mind, and they associate the two things, the real thing and that. And it's one of my, yeah, it's one of the most important things, is contextual understanding and really taking, and I've heard, and I just loved some of the entrepreneurial projects that Matty spoke about on Monday. I could not believe how, you know, and all of these concepts be utterly relevant to those children who are going to create either a financial or a social entrepreneurial project. So I learned so much from Matty the other day, and yes, thank you so much for,
thank you so much, Lily.
this thing.
we have thank you very much, we have 6 more minutes, and Professor R.C. Portal writes, meaning of an object is context bound and context is boundless. Yellow color can be associated with sunflower, the setting sun, the fire, and so on. The meaning of shapes are also very crucial. Triangles may be associated with movements, and circles may be associated with lack of movements, protection, and so on. And there can be layers of meanings of colors, chromatics, and any object, primary, secondary, culture specific, symbolic, and so on. Don't you think that we should only deal with first level meanings rather than complex associations of words with the world we are living? And Lily, we have 5 minutes for you. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. You know, I'll have to write a thesis, I think. I believe we start simple, but you know what? Even the youngest children have opinions and ideas that are quite complex. They love to get involved in philosophical conversations. So sure, we can give them the basis of like what that triangle is. But it's because of what it is that all of those other associations with it are working. You know, just because it's a triangle is why we have a love triangle. And I think that you have to be cognizant, obviously, of the level of your child's, we all know the Vygotsky's GPD, the zone of proximal development. We do not want to stretch the children beyond whether, you know, their brains are frying, but children love complexity. And I think one of maybe the issues in factory style education was that we really stuck very much with that. And, you know, I don't know if your question is saying we should. I think you're having a bit of I think it's a little bit ironic, because you know, as a professor, I know that you would be aware of how important all these complexities are. But I love to start with what it is, analyze it for exactly what it is, because that's when those comparative and the metaphorical language starts to build, and the other symbolic language builds because of exactly what it is. And I mean, in a sense, a triangle is something we created anyway. It's an abstract idea to begin with. So I love that question. I want to write a thesis on it. Can you help me?
Thank you so much, Lily. Thank you so much. We have love pouring all over the world for you. Alexandra Ghana writes, thank you so much, Lili-Ann, for your highly educational session. And Pragyanupani is asking about your email ID, which I will share with you all.
Would you please, because I've got everything on my screen and I can't find out how to write on the chat. I kind of feel like I've lost.
I will, Lily. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your session, Lily. You were amazing. Thank you so much.
I love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for being in my session, and